Hello folks, welcome to my shop. Today we are going to be servicing a shock and a set of forks. This is, I already removed the shock, as you can see. This is a 2021 YZ250F, but all this stuff will apply on any of the YZs, 125, 250F, 252 stroke, or 450 from the years 2006 to current, except for a few small differences which I'll discuss as we're going through this. Mainly where you fill up the nitrogen in here that uses this needle. This is some commie crap right here. I don't like these, but you know, it is what it is. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll get to the forks after the shock. So we're gonna dig right into the shock. All right. So first thing, we're gonna have to get the shock spring off. I don't want to have to recheck his sag. I know he had his sag set properly and stuff, and I don't want to have to recheck his sag when it's all said and done. So what I do is you see that little mark I punched right there on the spinner to the left. I mean, obviously put a little bit of a mark to the one on the right too, but that's okay. The one to the left, that is just below this little circle on the shock here. They don't have a circle like that on the other side, so that's a good place to index it to. And then what I do is I count with a small screwdriver. I count the lines here, and I wrote that down. We had 13 lines, so now I know when I remove the shock, when I go to put it back on, I keep turning this bottom spinner right here, and then I'll snug this one down. And when I have this line right here directly below this with the top spinner locked down, when there's 13 lines here, that will be at the exact same spring preload, which means his racer sag will be pretty much the same. So we'll have that covered. And then up here I mark the high speed and low speed typically don't move when we're taking this out, but just in case it does a little bit, I'll know because I marked them. See how I marked the high speed there with the Sharpie, and right here the low speed. Like I said, they typically don't move. Another thing I marked was over here. You see that right there, that little straight line I put, that's just to the right of this arrow. And the reason I did that is because when we go to tighten this back up, if we tighten past that, it's going to be equivalent to adding more high-speed compression. And if we don't tighten all the way up to that, it'll be equivalent to less high-speed compression, because as you tighten that down and it goes in, there's a spring in here that it bottoms out on the shock in here. So you're actually compressing the same spring that the high-speed compression compresses when you bolt this down. So we want to put this in the same place so he won't have to change any settings. He'll just be able to bolt this back on. It's going to feel the same way it did when he pulled it off. The only difference is it's going to feel a little bit fresher because we're going to have fresh fluid in it and nitrogen. Down here at the back, on the bottom, the rebound, I counted how many clicks the rebound was at, and that was at 7 clicks. And then I turned it all the way out, because with it all the way out, that's going to help us when it's time to bleed the shock. And I write all this stuff down. 13 lines, that's the lines that I counted right here, and 7 rebound. That's really all I need to know, because these other two right here I have them marked, and they typically don't move, but in case they move a little bit, I do have them marked. So let's get started. We'll give her a little bit of lube here. That's just WD-40. Loosen up the top spanner. We have that one loose. We'll grab a tool. I'll loosen this one all the way to the top. Alright, now for the bottom one, I'll start with the punch just to get it broke loose, because sometimes they're stiff at first. There we go. Then I'll use this tool. You can use the punch all the way to the end if you don't have this tool. I'm going to loosen this until the spring's able to slide up and down. That way I can go ahead and unlast the parts that are holding the spring on the shock down on the bottom of the shock. I got both the spinners all the way up. Turn the shock around. Now we have to pop this off. The best thing to do right here is first get the bumper up and out of the way. If you pull this up like that, it slides the bumper up. And grab the bumper with one hand, grab that, there we go. From there you can use a flat head and just continue sliding it up if you can get it under. Come on, girl. Okay, here we go. Yeah, you just slide the bumper up the shaft. And you have this ring that has a slit in it. You can just slide that out. Slide this off. And you can slide the spring off. These springs only fit one way. I mean, they can fit both ways, but they're only supposed to go one way. You'll see how that only has a little bit of play on that side. This has a lot of play on that side. So we'll remember that when we go to put it back together. Alright, I got all this off. Let me go ahead and give this a cleaning real quick before we start digging into her. Oh, before we clean her, let me pop this cap off real quick here. Because I'm going to want to clean these here. Again, this is just a servicing. Hold on, let me look for something. There we go. This is just a servicing, so we're not looking to fully disassemble this shock. All we're looking to do is just get the old fluid out, get new fluid in, and fill it up with nitrogen. The bike is fairly low in hours, and so there's no reason to go in and do it and make problems when she was doing fine. We're just freshening her up. So usually like gunk and stuff gets underneath this cap right here, so I like to lift this cap up, and I'll spray this whole shock with WD-40 all around it, and go outside and hit it with the air hose, high pressure air, and just get all the grit and dirt out of it. So let me spray in here with WD-40, get everything wet. Alright, I'm gonna go blow her off. Okay, if you watch any of my videos, you know I always say there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's more than one way to do this. We can go this route through the bottom, pull this all apart, and flush it out, fill the fluid up from the bottom, and put it back together. But I personally don't like that method. It has a tendency when you're pushing it back in to contract the bladder a little bit more than when it's just resting in there freely with no pressure. And it doesn't always do the best job of getting it fully bled the way I'm about to do it. I've had good luck doing it this way. I don't know if anyone else does it like this, but this is how I do it. Now there's a tool to get these off, but I don't have that tool. What I do is I took a wrench, it's 15/16, and I cut it just like that. I'm sure in metric there's the equivalent to 15/16. It's just what I grabbed that fit, and I wasn't scared to cut it up, because it's just kind of a crappy buffalo wrench. So it works good, it gets it done. And if you don't have the tool to do this, you can just do the same. Oh, you know what? We have to let the nitrogen out of the shock before we do that. These damn needles, I can't stand these. I wish they just stuck with the Schrader valves, you know, the little air valve right here. It's much easier than sticking these needles in there. You have to, the needle has to be in good shape, has to be nice and sharp, or that little rubber piece that's in here, it can actually push it out of its seat in there. And then you got to take all this apart and reseat that. This needle, I've used it one time, so it should still be good. Alright, we're hooked up. And just out of curiosity, before we take it apart, let's see what nitrogen pressure he was at. I got this Tusk air shock pump here, or air fork pump. It works great for stuff like this. You get them for like $30 or $40 from Rocky Mountain. You can get them on eBay. Oh, battery's acting up. Let me fix this real quick. All right, we're back in business. The battery just had a bad connection in there. Let's see what we end up with. Let's just out of curiosity, 107. So that's 107 psi that's in here currently. We're going to go ahead and let it all out. See how much? Did you hear? Just hardly any, right? And it's reading 0. And the reason being is because that's such a small space. It doesn't take much to fill it up to 150. Doesn't take much to drop it back down. But oh wait, no, there's a little more in here. Okay. We want to get it down to atmosphere pressure. Just let it all out. It takes longer with these needles. The air has to travel through that needle orifice. And it just takes forever. I'm not a big fan of these needles, but it is what it is. It's what they're giving us these days. Okay. And then what I like to do is compress the shock now that she has no nitrogen in her. And continue letting out. Just trying to get rid of all the pressure. Right? See how more come out? I'm just trying to get rid of all the pressure in there. Of course, then I'll extend the shock back out. There we go. I'm going to leave that needle in there for right now because I'm going to go ahead and bleed the air out of the nitrogen one more time once I have this open and the oil dumped out. Yeah, I'll just leave that there. Let's go ahead and remove it. And here's why I put that sharp end right here, because it helps you get around this. See right here? Helps you get around there. Alright, let me grab a tray real quick because it might ooze some oil out. There we go. I'm looking forward to the moment I can start turning this by hand. Now, okay, I can turn it by hand. When you turn it by hand, you want to be real careful not to bump the high-speed compression if you got it your setting locked in like I do. But you also want to hold this down as you're taking this out, because there's going to be, see how the oil's already oozing out of here? There's going to be some pressure in there just from gases of the oil as it's oxidized. You don't want it jumping out and parts going everywhere. It doesn't take a whole lot of pressure to hold it down, but just hold it down. See it? Just let that pressure ooze out. And them bubbles that you see, that doesn't mean that there was air in the shock. What that is once we relieve the nitrogen pressure, the gases from the oil oxidizing gets released out of the fluid. While it's under pressure, them bubbles just kind of disappear into the fluid. But you see that they're in here. There's a little washer. You don't want to lose that. Let's go ahead and pop that out now. You see that? So keep that. And we have this. Then we have that spring that I was telling you about, the high-speed compression spring. And then inside of here, there's this little assembly. I usually just take a pair of pliers and kind of grab it and work it out. Let that drain a little bit while I grab them. You just kind of wiggle it, grab it, and wiggle it. There's a rubber seal on it. You don't want to damage the seal. There it is. Now once you get this out of there, it has several pieces to it. I just keep it together, but you'll see it comes up. And there's another little washer down there, or a spacer often, yeah, in there. But just leave that together. It's the best way to do it, because you don't want to take it apart and start, unless you really know what you're doing. I mean, I could do it. I've taken these apart, but it's just easier to keep it together because there is like another washer up in here and stuff, and you'll start losing all that stuff. So just take that like the other parts and just set it off to the side on a clean spot. And now I'm gonna dump fluid out of the shock. I'm sorry, backtrack. I'm gonna go ahead and relieve all the pressure from here now. That there's really not much of anything in it, but that's good. Now I'll go ahead and pull the needle out for now. I will be sticking it back in when it's time to put nitrogen in it. Set that over here. Okay, now it's time to dump the shock. It's like anything, you just drop oil. Just hold it upside down like that. You can see the fluid is a little bit dark. Not bad, a little dark. Give it some strokes. You want to work all the stuff out of there. And then just kind of, yeah, just work it out. It takes time, but and then just let it sit upside down for a little bit and let the last couple drips come out. For these Yamaha shocks, KYB KC2, you can get that from Rocky Mountain or pretty much anywhere. That is the OEM fluid right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice a little bit of this fluid for the sake of a flushing. Since we're not going to be pulling this whole shock apart we don't have to pull this whole shock apart and clean it because it didn't come apart or anything. It's not really dirty. It just needs fresh fluid. But a little flushing doesn't hurt. So I put some fluid in there, and now I'm going to stroke the shock a few times. You don't have to put a lot. You can hear it in there. And just sit here and stroke it. You got to twist it sometimes a little bit to get it go in. And then cover the end right here. Here, let me get something to cover that with. I'm going to use this little rubber thing. This is actually, you know, the plugs that you use for your dirt bike exhaust. I cut these out, and I take these little round pieces off of different sizes for stuff like this. You want to get it up in the hole and seal it. This one, it doesn't quite. There it goes. Just get it up in there and seal it off. Sometimes you'll see right on top, but you want to do that because we're going to run that fluid up into the reservoir right here to flush that out as well. And really all we're doing is just trying to collect all the old fluid, and this is a good flushing, kind of helps that. All right, now we have this, so we're going to dump it all out now. And you see that fluid's coming out nice and clear. Yeah, you can see on the camera. So she's going to be good. And now all we have to do is fill her back up with fluid and bleed her. Okay, I'm using a mallet here and a mallet there just to keep the shock upright like this, so as I pour the fluid in here I don't lose it. Boy, she's thirsty. Oh, there we go. Alright, now this is where you want to start bleeding it. If you notice the shock, even though I have it laid flat here, it's at a slight angle this way, so the bubbles will be able to make their way up. You want to slide this down and keep track of that piston in there, the valve, the seal assembly here. Make sure that doesn't slide up when you push the shaft in, and it helps to twist the shaft you're sliding in. That way it relieves some of the friction so that it doesn't push the seal up. Just push it in nice and gently, as far as you can push it in without the fluid going over the top, and pull it down quick, as quick as you can at least, and you'll see some air bubbles come up. Fill it back up as that's happening. And do it again. Alright, and just keep doing that and you bleed it out. You just keep doing that until no more air bubbles come out of the main body. Don't worry about what comes out of the reservoir. Pay attention to the port that goes down to the main body. Keep doing that until no more air bubbles comes out. You'll see how I angle it up a little bit to kind of help them come out. Oh, there goes a couple. And another one, and another one. Alright, do it again. See how the fluid's rising up to the top here? I'll just keep pushing in until it gets almost to the top, and then I'll tug it back. There was one air bubble. There goes a couple more. And basically you just keep doing this. It can take about 10 or 15 good times to get everything out. Especially if you start OCD in it. Oh, this one's looking like it bled really quick. I don't see any air bubbles coming out anymore. But just for good measure, I'm going to do it one more time then. Try to yank it as hard as I can. Oh, there one big air bubble, so that means I'm going to do it a couple more times. Like I said, just keep doing it until no more air bubbles come up. I'll go ahead and pause this and knock this out for you. Oh, by the way, if you have one of them shocks where no matter how much you twist this as you're pushing in, it keeps wanting to push the valve assembly, the seal assembly in, then you're going to either have to do it by yourself or have a second person help you. And you can take a flat head and just pop it in here under the seal and pry it against the body of the shock right here and hold that seal from sliding up the shaft as you compress the shock shaft in and out of the body. That's happened to me before. I had a shock, no matter how much I sat here and spun this thing to push it in, it kept pushing the whole seal assembly in, and it's just how I had to do it to get it bled. But usually they're kind of stuck in place, and as long as you twist the shaft as you're pushing it in, the seal assembly will stay right there. And another air bubble. Let me keep going at it. Alright, I have the shock body bled. I still have to bleed the reservoir, but we'll get to that. Before that, the cap. Remember the cap that we screwed off right here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to make it easier. What happens is when I go to put this on, it's going to be full of fluid. But you see this void space right here? This can hold air, and I don't want it to as I put it in, because that's going to be air in the system. So what I'm going to do is right here, just above the seal here, and just under the threads, there's a little spot here. I'm going to drill a hole on this side and on this side, on two sides, and what that'll do is that'll allow the air to escape as I'm pushing this down, allow the air to escape so that fluid can fill this void up, so we get this thing 100% bled. Let me get a smaller drill bit than this, and I'll get some holes drilled. Alright, here you go. You'll see I put a hole right there. See that little spot? And then on the other side, the same thing. The rubber seal is what seals it. It's not the thread, so we're not going to lose the seal here. The rubber seal is what does work. We're just giving a space for as we're putting this down, for the air to escape out and the fluid to fill that void. Because what I'm going for here is 100% bled. I'm going for absolutely no air in this shock. That's the way I like them. Alright, remember that little rubber cap I showed you a few minutes ago that I can seal this off with? I'm now going to use that. I'm going to fill this all the way to the top. Since we already have this blade, we don't have to worry about this. Now there's a little air in here, and we have to get rid of that. So I'm going to put it all the way to the top, the fluid, put this cap in there, seal it off, and then do this. You'll feel the air bubbles. You'll hear them and feel them. Boop, 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 boop. I'm going to sit here and hold the shock at a slight angle here, as you see, because I don't want the fluid that I put in there to slip back out. Like I said, you'll hear it, you'll feel it on the shock. She's almost there. She's a thirsty shock. We're getting it. She's so close now. I think one more time is all we're going to need here. I don't think there's any more. See how I'm circling around, holding it straight up and down here? Oh, we can't really see it there. I'm just holding it straight up and down, circling it around. So any air bubbles in there will rise to the top. Okay, I believe that's it. I'm going to try to lay her down, paying attention to make sure she doesn't suck air in as I do this. Got to keep it full. We're good. She didn't suck any air in, and she's full to the top. This is now bled, and that's bled. So there's no air in there. Next thing we have to do is get this piece back in. Let me make sure it's nice and clean. Alright, I'm going to put it back in the same way I got it out. Just going to grab the tip right here with the pair. See, I'm grabbing just the very tip right here, not the O-ring, just above the O-ring. You grab it with a pair of pliers. And the same way, I like to set it in at an angle because this does have a little spot right here where air bubbles can sit in. So what I do is I drop it in this little this fluid at an angle like this, so the air can escape. And then you got to kind of wiggle it and push it down. You'll feel it kind of pop into place. There it goes. Make sure she's fully in there. She is fully in there, as you can see. Now we set the spring back in. Then we have this piece, but remember we had that washer, that little washer. So you just want to drop the washer in there. It'll usually stay in on its own because of the oil. You see how it's staying in? So set this down on top. Oh, remember the holes that we put in? The holes we drilled in? We have one on each side. As you set it in at an angle. So if it's like this, set it in at an angle with the hole up, with one of the holes faced towards the top, so the air can escape out of there as you're pressing it down, and then you level it out and screw it in. Let me tap this back up all the way to the top with oil. I would rather have oil escape. There, I have that all the way to the top. I'm going to set it in at an angle. Here, I'll try to do it in a way you can see it. Alright, and then just tighten it down by finger. Being careful not to touch a high-speed compression, because remember I mentioned that we have that setting marked, so we don't want to lose that setting. Even turning it by hand, if you start grabbing that, you'll be surprised. It turns pretty easily. Alright, now we just have to tighten her up. Remember how I put that little mark? It's right over here. I'm going to tighten it to where that mark lines up with that arrow again. That way we'll be at the exact same high-speed compression setting that we were at before. So I'm going to compress the spring just underneath there to the exact same spot. Don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there it is. And then the marks still line up right here, so I didn't turn the low speed and I didn't turn the high speed any, so we're going to be good. Now all we got to do is fill her up with nitrogen, pop that cap back on. I'll go ahead and knock that back on right now. Alright, we got that on. Now we got to play with this stupid needle again. Let me go ahead and slide that in there first before we even get started. I like to push them needles all the way in. There was a time I didn't push it all the way in. I kept trying to fill it with nitrogen. It wouldn't fill up, and found out later I didn't have that rubber piece in there. Can be sometimes about that deep, so you have to get it all the way in there. Push it straight in. Obviously, if you shoot it at an angle, you might end up hitting the bladder that sits on the outer edges here, and you don't want to do that. Okay, gonna go ahead and fill it with nitrogen, and then I'll adjust the pressure level. Let's see if we got enough in there. $173, so we have to lower it down to 150. There's 150. Pull the needle out. Fast. There it is, guys. Let's see how she feels real quick. Alright, I still have the rebound turned all the way out. Let's just push her all the way in. Let her come up. That's a nitrogen pressure. I push it up. I don't know if you can hear it or not. Listen, I'll bring it close to the camera. There's no air bubbles in there. Beautiful. So now we got to get the spring back on. The spring. Alright. And then she's pretty much done. Okay, remember I said there's one way this spring goes. That's tighter. That's looser. So this is going to be the bottom. Jeez. I got to drain the nitrogen. Open this back up and put that on. It must have fallen off. Remember I said they usually don't fall off. Wouldn't you know it, you got the camera running, that's when it does fall off. Let me knock that out real quick. Alright, got that straightened out. Back to where we were. So that's on the bottom. Oh. I'm going to go ahead and slide this back down. Set this piece right here underneath the spring. There we go. And now I'll go ahead and tighten these spinners back. Alright, went ahead and got that locked down. Remember, counted the lines with the circle right here. You see the line that I scrubbed in right here. There were 17 lines with that scrub mark matching that circle, so we are good. I'll take the bumper here, slide it down, back down on the shaft, and I'm going to go ahead and pop these out real quick and just make sure that they still have good lube on them and stuff. If everything's good, I'll just pop them back in. Well, they're a little dry, So I'm going to go ahead and lube that back up, clean that and lube that, and get the shock on the bike and pull the forks off, and then we'll get right into the forks. Oh, almost forgot. I need to put that back to 7 clicks rebound as well. And you can spin this shaft, right, to get it where you can access the rebound adjuster when it's on the bike. If you didn't remember where it went, just, you know, test fit the shock onto the bike and figure out where you can access it while it's on the bike. If you have to turn that 180 degrees, go ahead and do that. Before we dig into the forks here, there's my nitrogen tank. I purchased these valves right here, regulators or whatever, on eBay for like 150 bucks that can bring the pressure down to, you know, 100, 200 or whatever. And and it came with, it's for like race, like the shocks on race cars and stuff when people run nitrogen in them. And it just comes with a normal air valve to it, nozzle, whatever. And then I use that Tusk air shock pump to set the pressure exactly where I need to. Basically, I put more pressure in the shock than what it needs, and then I bleed it down with that to the exact pressure I want, and then pull it off. All right, let's get to the forks. Keep in mind, this is just a servicing. We're not going to be replacing any seals or anything like that. Let me get these cleaned up before we start taking them apart. All right, during this job, the compression setting will not be changed. As we pull this off and put it back on, that clicker stays the same. However, the rebound setting does change. The rebound on the bottom as we're taking it apart. So we want to go ahead and count these and figure out where they're at so we can save that setting to return it back to it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like 7 on that fork leg. Always check both. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He had 9 on this one and 7 on that one. So we're going to return this back to just 8. Since 9 and 7, average that out, that's 8. So we're just going to return that back to 8, and I'll let him know I did that. He might not have even known. That happens all the time. Alright, the first thing I have to do is drain the fluid on the outer chamber. So I'll loosen these up. I already had these loose on the bike. It's always best to kind of get the caps at least loose while they're still clamped in the triple clamp. It makes it a lot easier. Okay, I'm going to turn this upside down and dump it. Whoa, that's some dark fluid right there. That's that OEM snotty stuff. I don't know what it is with the OEM fluid. They say they use S1 in the outer chambers, but it comes out snotty. And the interesting thing is after you change the fluid one time, if you use S1 in the outer chamber, it won't come back out snotty again. So I look at that. I almost think they put some type of stabilizer in the outer chamber just to keep the bushings lubed in case a bike sits on the stand in the showroom floor too long, that at least the upper bushing will have some lube on it. Or maybe they put grease in there and it mixes with the oil. I don't know what it is, but OEM fluid definitely likes to come out snotty. Wow. I was going to try to capture that and measure it, but as snotty as it is, I'm not going to be able to get it all out just by draining it like that. So let me just leave this fork upside down for a minute and get the other one. Like I said, they usually don't come out this snotty, but look how long it takes before it even starts dropping anything. And honestly, if you're running with stock fluid, that's why it's good to service your forks pretty early when you first get the bike. Maybe as soon as the suspension gets broken in, just go ahead and service it and get this stuff out of there. I'm gonna leave this one upside down for a minute and go back to the other one. That's just nasty. I guess we're just gonna have to take them apart because that stuff is just hanging in there. So we'll have to wait till we get the inner chamber out and we can clean all that junk out of there. What I was saying is usually I like to measure how much fluid comes out of each fork leg, even if it's my personal bike, just to see where it's been at, if it stayed at the setting that I put it at, did I have any leaks that I was unaware of or whatever. But especially when they're stock, I'm always curious of what they send them out stock. A lot of times they don't match what the manual says is the standard setting. But we're not going to be able to do it this one because it's just too snotty. It's just too much fork oil hanging out in the fork leg. Alright, at this point it's always good practice to take the rebound and turn it all the way out just so nothing binds while we're doing this job. Okay, pop this out of here. Let me get the axle. Let me clean this axle real quick. There we go. That axle's being stubborn trying to go in there. Let me grab something else for now. What I need to do is compress this. This tool that you use to take the cap off, it comes with that piece right there. What you do is compress it. Stick that tool under it like that. This is the only spot in the whole bike that takes a 15 millimeter on it. The whole bike. So we'll pop that cap or the rebound adjuster off. There's a rod in here in the center. Go ahead and pull that out. Okay, now let me see. Let me loosen up back the bottom. She might drop some oil, so let me catch that real quick. Okay. So now all I'll do is I'll just lift all this up right off of the inner chamber. Set that aside. Then I'll take the spring, slide it up and off. Set that aside. And then I'm going to check, see if this comes off. If it does, I will remove it. And it does. So there we go. We have the inner chamber assembly. I'm going to check its state of bleed real quick just by compressing it. Yeah, there's air in it. I don't know if you can hear it. Listen. But we'll take care of all that when we go to rebleed that. And this, when you buy this tool, sometimes they'll come with this tool, sometimes they don't, but you're going to need that too. It just fits right in here because we're going to take this inner chamber apart and drain that. We're going to drain it, give it a little bit of a flush like we did on the shock, and then fill it up with some fresh fluid. Once you get that loose, you can set the here, let me show you. Now all you have to do is just compress the fork right here, and as you compress it, look, you see how that pops up as I compress it all the way in, and then grab this and just kind of give it a little wiggle and a yank, and there it is. Now one of the things you want to look for, let me set this aside real quick. You want to make sure that this hasn't cracked or broke, this plastic piece right here. They are known to crack and break. This one looks like it's in good shape, so we're going to be good. But that's one of the things that you want to look for. And I'll clean all this up. I'm going to take that entering chamber, and I like to cover these holes just so oil only comes out of here, and dump it. Oh, that's here. If this thing gets stuck in the hole, you can just thread it in lightly. There you go. I'm going to leave that sitting upside down right here for a little bit. And go ahead and start cleaning the fork leg up here. Remember how snotty that oil was. So what I'm going to do is, again, we're not replacing the seal, so I'm not going to fully disassemble this. Since everything was good, it just needs a servicing. Like I said, the bike only has maybe 50 to 60 hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spray a whole bunch of WD-40 in here, and then I'm going to use a long blower, like an air thing like this, and I'm going to put it in here and spray all the WD-40 out, and that will push all that junk out, spray it out both ways, and then I'll let this tube sit on its, fake like this for a while and let all that remaining drip out. So let me take care of that. So you can fully extend this all the way. You can fully extend it all the way until the bushings just make contact right here, and that will help you get it all cleaned out when you're blowing out the inside. So I'm going to set this upside down for a little bit and just let that all drain out. And while that's doing that, we're going to go ahead and fill up the inner chamber up with fluid. I'm just going to use that big crescent wrench right there to hold this up in the air for me. Right here I'm going to use Yamaha lube S1. It's what the manual of the factory calls for. Hold on one second. Make sure I got all this cleaned up good. What I'm going to do is give it first a little bit of fluid and just a flushing. That's all I'm going to do. Give it some fresh fluid here. Stroke. You don't have to fill it up completely and waste a ton of fluid. Just get enough in there to kind of flush the old stuff out. Give it some strokes real gently. Lay it over, kind of roll it around a little bit. Get it all around, and then you go ahead and dump it. And now I'll let that one sit upside down again for a minute and kind of just let it last a little bit. Drip out of there. Alright, now to fill it and bleed it. What I do is with this rod fully extended, I'll just hang it here. I'll fill it up right to these little holes. Alright, I have it filled to the little holes here. I got them covered. You want to cover them now because as you compress this in, it could push fluid up and you don't want it to come out the hole. So I'm compressing it one time. Pull it out. You want to do it slowly or it shoots fluid straight up out the top onto the ceiling of your freaking roof. Alright, let's see where we're at. Alright, we're just below the holes a little bit. So let me bring it back up to the holes. There we go. And now I'm going to just sit here and just stroke all the air out of it. The bubbles. You'll hear them coming up, or you can even look in here. You can look in there and actually see them rising up to the top. Again, you don't want to go too quick, especially at the top of the stroke. At the bottom of the stroke, right here, you can go a little quicker and won't push. And then what I like to do is right at the very bottom where I'm at, give it a couple short but strong pulls. At this point, you can do it strong and fast because it won't shoot oil up. It only shoots oil up mainly when this shaft is further up into the body. Alright, that's looking good. Okay, with the shaft fully extended and she's full of fluid and bled, I'm going to take this, hold on. Okay, shaft fully extended. She's full of fluid all the way up to the holes and it's bled. So what you do is you pop this in, keep your fingers over the holes. I keep my fingers, oh sorry, let me put this where you can see it. Let me get something to collect this oil. Because as we bleed it, you can see I put a something to collect oil down there, because as we bleed it, it's going to drop fluid. So what I do is I take the finger off one of the holes lightly here, the hole right here, but keep my finger on top of it lightly, let the fluid just kind of drip out, because if you remove it completely, it could shoot all the way across the room. See, like that. As you're pressing this in, you're going to get to a point where you can't press it anymore. It's like spring loaded, and that's where you have to compress this. Let me see if I can get all this on camera. There we go. So I can't get this in anymore. It's just like spring. It's hydro lock. So what I do is I press this down just with a little bit of force like that. As I compress the whole assembly, you hear that? Hear the oil coming out? The oil will be coming out of them two little holes that I was covering earlier. Take it all the way to about 1 inch from the bottom. See, I got about 1 inch from the bottom. You want to save 1 inch for the final bleeding. Then you press this in. You'll press this in. You'll see that shaft come down. Once you get that all the way down, stick that tool back on there. And tighten her up. We'll get her tighter, even tighter than that once we have her on the bike. But now what I do is I give her some strokes. Don't take her all the way to the bottom. Just stroke it about halfway. Because now you're just going to free up the last few air bubbles. Then you want to hold it at a slight angle like this with one of the air bubbles towards the top. And you're going to hear the last little bit come out. That's the last little bit of air in the system. As you compress it all the way down this time. All the way. Here goes. That's it, guys. She's bled. Listen. No air bubbles. So yeah, she's good to go. Just wipe off the oil here. It's all dripping off of her. And clean her up and good. Okay, I'll take the inner chamber now, flip her upside down. I'll remove this thing I have on it. Slide this rod back in there. That's all it does, it just sits in there. Then you want to take this right here and bottom it out. Finger tight, just like that. And leave that like that for now. Go ahead and add this piece back on her. The spring. Okay, so now we have the spring back on it. She's upside down, but the spring spacer and everything, the metal tube in there. So I'll take the outer tubes here, slide it back down. Then you want to stick your finger in there and center out the inner chamber rod. Just put it in the center here as you compress the fork. And you take that tool again and you pry it. Underneath, you pop it in underneath there. Then you screw this on All you have to do is put it on finger tight for now, because then we'll grab the tools. Alright, let me see here. I need my 15mm wrench. Here it is. And the 17. Now you remember how we had that? Let me take a second to show you this. Remember how I told you to bottom this out all the way down a few minutes ago? You see the gap that's there? That's how you want it, because this needs to be bottomed out on the shaft. And then when we go to tighten this up, we're actually bringing this to this piece to lock this piece in, as it's bottomed out on the shaft. That's how you want that. So if you don't twist this all the way down, you might not have this bottomed out in the shaft, which will make your fork extend out a little bit longer, and you don't want that. There you go. You want it pretty tight. Don't want to strip it, but you definitely want it pretty tight. I have heard of other people's coming loose. Oops. And now we have to tighten that up. Okay, this time I was actually able to get the shaft in there. It's a little tight though, but or the axle. Where'd my tool go? All right. Tighten up the 17mm. Same thing as the last one I tightened up. You want it pretty tight. You don't want to strip it out. You definitely want it pretty tight. There we go. Or that's that for this one. All we have to do now is add fluid in the inner chamber right through here, and we're going to do that at the end after we do the other fork. So I'm just going to seal this off a couple threads. She's ready to go. Oh, while I'm here, before I forget, let me go ahead and set the rebound on this one at 8, and then I'll do the other one too at the same when I get to the same place. Lightly seat it. There you go. Alright, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Here it goes. Alright, let's get to the next fork. Like I said, we will be putting fluid in the outer chamber part here at the very end. On the fork leg number 2, it's the same thing as fork leg number 1. Nothing's changed here. We're doing the same thing. I'm probably not going to be as detailed on this one. I'm just going to run through it and you can watch. Let me turn the setting up on, oh, here. His axles, I'll tell you. There we go. I do not know what's going on with this one. These are virgin forks. They shouldn't be doing this. Let me swap to a stronger impact. Like I said, these are virgin forks. They shouldn't. I don't think I've ever ran into one that was this hard to get off. Don't know what's going on here, but we're gonna have to find out, and this is the only way to get it open. There we go. Unless someone really goofed up and put way too much lock, everything looks good. Maybe they put too much Loctite. I mean, I wouldn't think you use Loctite on this. The threads look good. I don't understand it. Well, hopefully it goes back together easier than it came apart. Pull this out. Press the fork. Alright, pull the spring off, set that aside. Pull this doohickey off, set that aside. Alright, I'm going to clean all the snot off of this. And I'm going to inspect the threads inside that fork too, see what's going on here. Let me do that real quick. Everything looks good. It just looks like a little black tarn. I don't understand why that thing was so tough, but we're going to get it all cleaned out and hopefully she goes back together well. Let me get all this stuff cleaned up. Alright, just like the last shot, same steps. Pop this on here, put that on there. Woo! That one was even under pressure. What is going on? What happened to this fork? Everything's looking good. Wow. I don't know what was going on with this fork. Well, hopefully she assembles well. Let me clean all this up. I usually don't see them hold pressure like that. Everything's looking good. The plastic's in good shape. Shim stack's in good shape. We got a little bit of rust on this spring right here. That can happen sometimes, but you don't want that. I don't know what's going on. It must... I don't know. Because this is sealed from the outer chamber. So, you know, inside the fork, the outer chamber of the fork, this is the inner chamber. This is all sealed off. It shouldn't have gotten any more. I've seen it before where they got moisture in here, but that's usually really old, worn out bikes. But something else that caught my attention here were two things. Do you see, can you see right there how the spring's been rubbing right here? It hasn't rubbed anywhere else really, just right here. And then if you look at this axle, his front axle here, you see how he's been hitting this with the hammer? When you hit these with the hammer, it doesn't allow it to go all the way into the fork anymore like it's supposed to. This will always be exposed out. And what that does is that pinches the bottom fork tubes in. And then when they go to compress, they're pinched in. And that can cause, it has to actually bend the forks as it's compressing. I believe what we had going on here was a bending. And that indicates that to me. And this is why that was happening. So what he really needs is a new front axle and start all over again. I mean, today all I'm going to do is because he needs a bike for the weekend, so all I'm going to do is take a grinder and just gently shave the high spot all the way around here so I can get this on properly, so I can space out the front the two forks where they come on the fork, so I can get them spaced out perfectly right. If you watch my suspension tuning video, on the first part, the introduction, suspension and chassis tuning, I explain in depth what happens there and why it's important to get your front wheel on there right and the forks aligned right, because stuff like this can happen. I believe that's what was happening there. And when that happens, it can let stuff pass the seals, and I mean, you got to look at it like this. It's now taking this rod right here. Hopefully there's no wear on it. Nope, this fared well, but it's basically bending it like that. It just bends it ever so slightly. It's just not good for the suspension at all. You got to make sure you get that front axle spacing on the front wheel just right. And again, if you don't know how to do that, just go to search my videos under suspension and chassis setup. It's in the video, the first video, the introduction, and I go through that. But that's what happened here. I know he's been doing this for a while. I'm gonna have to have another talk with him. So that this doesn't keep happening, because in the past I've had to change out front axles on his bike because he has hit him with a hammer, and I told him you got to use a rubber mallet, and I guess he went back to a hammer again. I mean, he's usually like changing flat tires real quick at the track in the middle of a ride or a race or whatever, and he's just, you know, trying to rush and get things through. I understand that, but yeah, just use a mallet. All right, you know the routine here. A little bit of fluid to flush it out. Give it some strokes. Oop, that's why you don't go too fast. It'll shoot it right up in the sky. Do that a couple times. Oh, I did it again. Alright, now I got to roll it around a little bit. And then I'm going to place that upside down over here. Place that upside down right there and just let that drain for a little bit on the towel. Alright, let's fill her back up now. That bottle's empty. Oop, my bad. Alright, cover the holes just like in the first shock and compress with the first fork. Easy does it, just work out the air bubbles. Give it a good last couple inches, couple hard strokes, just the last couple inches. Alright, she's looking good. Alright, shaft fully extended, just like in the first fork. Keep both holes covered at first. I mean, I do for whatever reason. Press it in, take one out. Oh, there it goes. Then, now that I got it to the point where it's springy, I can't press it in anymore. Now I'm going to compress the shock, if you can see down there in the jar, or in the measuring cup. Press it down to all the way to about 1 inch from the bottom. You'll see fluid come out of the two holes as you do that. I'm also pressing this in against the spring pressure as I do that. Get it to about 1 inch from the bottom. Bring it back up. Squeeze this in. You'll see it going in, and the shaft is coming back out as the cap goes in. The shaft comes back out. Alright, now I'm going to give it a couple strokes, just to about the halfway point, not all the way, because I want to save that last little bit, because that's when it presses out the last little bit in there that needs to be pressed out. And you hold it at an angle here, and compress it fully this time. You'll hear it come out the top, listen, and you can see it. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. Right here, you'll see it shoot out. Watch. See all them air bubbles, and the last little bit was just pure fluid. So that pushed out the last bit of air out of here. And now she is fully bled good. Alright, just like in the first shock, flip this upside down. I'm going to remove that. Make sure this is all the way bottomed out. There it is. Slide that back in there. Slide that back on in there. Put fork spring back in. Hold on, phone call. Alright. Where did that axle go? Here it is. And that's why I had to put it in this way, because he's got that end all flared up. Alright, and grab the socket for that. Alright, now hopefully this does not go together as hard as it came apart, because that sucked, and I don't know what to do about that if it does. I mean, the threads look good, everything looks good, so it's all cleaned up now, so it should just go together. Let's see. Oh, wrong way. Yep, it went together just fine. Huh. Who freaking knows? Came apart hard. Went together just fine once I got everything cleaned out. Get another. Actually, let me tighten that by hand the last little bit. There it is. Set the rebound clickers back to 8. All right. Ooh, getting a little messy. There it is. These forks, they call for 295 cc's of fluid in the outer chamber, so that's what we're going to put in it. I have 295 cc's fluid in here. Now here's where things get interesting. I don't know if you noticed, but the fluid I'm putting in here is red. I'm actually using synthetic automatic transmission fluid in the outer chamber instead of S1. Even though I understand the manual calls for S1 in the inner and the outer chamber, but I learned a trick off a guy that did suspension years ago, hang out in Thumper Talk forum. He mentioned that the S1 fluid is a hydraulic fluid that all of its characteristics are meant for the valving inside the fork, to you know, anti-foam properties and the viscosity and everything like that is for the is set up for actually the most critical part of the fork to perform right, which is the inner chamber where the valving's at. So we did put S1 in there. However, he mentioned using Mobil 1 synthetic automatic transmission fluid on the outer chamber. He said he doesn't do that for customers' bikes, only his personal bikes, because the customers probably wouldn't understand, and he didn't want to have to explain it to every customer. But this is how I do it, and I do it on friends' bikes too as well. Of course, I always ask them first, "Are you okay with me doing this?" And they give me the yay or nay. But the beauty of using this on the outer chamber is it has seal conditioners. You know, for your automatic transmissions, they have seals that, you know, need to be conditioned and stuff. So your seals will actually last quite a bit longer with these, stay in better shape. And also, they're real good for the bushings on the fork, because automatic transmissions have a lot of bushings and stuff like that, moving parts sliding against each other. So, and that's all the outer chamber does. This fluid in the outer chamber that we just poured in, its only purpose is to lube the bushings and to keep the seal wet. Also to take up some space so you can adjust your air spring. I mean, the more oil you put in the fork, the firmer the fork is at the bottom, and you know, you put less and it's not as firm. So that's really its only purpose. Where the inner chamber, its purpose is the valving, the fluid we add in the inner chamber, and the fluid we put in the outer chamber, its only purpose is the bushings and the seals. So there's nothing wrong with using that. Now, some people will tell you, don't do that, because they do mix. And they say that they can mix fluids, and the reason they say that is because the people that have tried it, when they go to change their fluid down the road, they find that the inner chamber might have a little bit of red color in the fluid now. And I find that too, although it takes quite a few hours before you get some of that red color in there. and it's very, you know, it's not full red like this is. It's just, I believe it's the ink. They put an ink in automatic transmission fluid. That's why all automatic transmission fluids are red, so that you know it's transmission fluid. And I believe it's just the ink just getting past the seal, you know, sitting on the shaft, going up and down, and it kind of gets that ink has a way of doing that. But the only reason I haven't changed, besides that, the only reason I haven't gone back to just S1 and inner and outer chamber is because it performs so good with this. There's a lot less stiction on the fork seals, and the forks slide up and down a lot easier. There's a lot less stiction. So once I got used to that, I mean, I felt it right away the first time I tried using automatic transmission fluid in the shock. I felt the difference right away. Before that, I had a friend, probably about a month before that, turn me on to you know, put a little bit of Rain-X on the fork leg, and that would make the fork smoother and less stiction. And he was right, it actually did, but it only lasts for like 2 motos. You'd be sprinkling more Rain-X on it. But doing it this way, with the automatic transmission fluid in the outer chamber, it feels every bit as good as the Rain-X. But I don't have to sit there and keep adding it. The fork's all just smoother, less stiction. My seals last longer. I tip my YZ250 2-stroke. I have 100 hours on that, and I have not had to change the seals on it yet. My YZ450, I had to change the seals at about 130 hours, but even then, I can usually run them at least 150 hours. That was actually a little bit premature that I had to change at 130, but that's okay. But that's why I run this. Now, you know, I don't suggest it. Just stick to the manufacturer's recommendations using S1 inner and outer fluid, unless you want to experiment and try it out for yourself. Make sure you get the synthetic automatic transmission fluid. Don't get the regular transmission fluid. That's it. What I'm going to do now is place these forks on the bike. I'm going to take this piece right here and put it back in here once I get them clamped down in the clamps. And I'll tighten up hold on a second, I'll tighten up the bottom, just the bottom clamp, because you don't want to pinch off the top. And I'll put a wrench on here and tighten it, and that will tighten both the inner chamber little cap right here and this outer cap all together. I'll just give it a nice little snug tight, because as you saw, I only tightened it by hand so far. And then after I do that, then I'll tighten the upper triple clamp, and the job will be complete. So that's it, guys. I appreciate you watching. I got to get this all back together now. I'll catch you guys later. If you like this kind of stuff, please click like and subscribe. I'm going to keep these videos coming, and appreciate you guys sitting through this and watching this. Catch you later.